This episode of Stage Free is made possible by the generous support of BMT InfoNet, a nonprofit that provides trusted information and support to transplant recipients and their loved ones. Welcome to our Stage Free podcast in partnership with BMT InfoNet. And we are both so very excited to team up for a very special podcast on a topic that simply doesn't get enough attention. I'm your host, Loriana Hernandez-Aldama. I'm a journalist, a two-time cancer survivor, and a global advocate, and I have been through it. And my mission is to give you, the patient and the caregiver, a front row seat to experts so we can empower you and educate you as you navigate this journey. Because let's face it, it's not easy, and you shouldn't have to do it alone. So today, our special guest is Dr. Catalina Lawsin, also known as the Intimacy Doc. And Dr. Catalina is renowned. She's a renowned psychologist and a sexual health expert who specializes in working with cancer survivors. And we are diving into one of cancer's darkest secrets. And I can't wait for this conversation. Dr. Catalina, thank you so much for joining us. I've been wanting to have this conversation for such a long time because survivors reach out to me and we're all struggling in so many different ways. You know, the treatment rooms prepare us. We know hair loss is coming. We know nausea is coming, fatigue, maybe neuropathy. But nobody really has this conversation of, hey, intimacy after cancer is going to suck. It's going to be very difficult. I mean, I hate to be Debbie Downer here, but it's not easy and you're not prepared. And I think the preparation part is what is so stressful. Like, how do we cope and what do we do? So tell me more about this. Tell me I'm not alone. Tell me my friends aren't alone who are survivors and that we're okay.
You're absolutely not alone. We know that anywhere between 40 to 100% of cancer survivors are going to experience sexual changes. And so much that I think we need to focus on is how cancer impacts intimacy. And intimacy isn't just physical sex. It is emotional intimacy. It is the connection in the relationship. And all of that gets challenged as cancer survivors are trying to figure out their connection to their body, how they see themselves in relationship. Meanwhile, partners have had to witness cancer patients go through this long journey and be their caregiver. And I think it's unfair to expect that not to shift how they're going to feel connected in the relationship. And too often, partners don't have a space to even talk about that. And so many cancer survivors say, I wish my partner felt like they could talk to me. So I'm excited for us today to really talk about how intimacy in the relationship and how couples together can cope with the changes that happen after treatment.
Boy, you hit on every single topic because this is your topic. I mean, when you talk about couples, I know I have shared, and I have friends who share that you were quickly thrown into patient caregiver mode. I mean, maybe like my husband's packing a wound in my breast during breast cancer and during leukemia, he's bathing me. And I can't imagine how hard it is for a caregiver to suddenly flip a switch and be like, oh, and now you're sexy. And that's hard to go from patient caregiver back to husband and wife. And then as a patient and survivor, I look in the mirror, I don't even have my own DNA. I'm in a mind and body I don't recognize. I don't feel sexy. And so you have those two dynamics and a lot of people say, oh, well, the depression is from the cancer. No, the depression's from the downfall after the cancer. So back up to tell me what you're hearing from couples about this kind of shift in dynamics.
Yeah, we know that couples who go into cancer treatment with any distress or relationship concerns come out, cancer doesn't make it easier. And so particularly when we're talking about intimacy, that's already particularly in long-term couples, already something that you have to actively fuel and nurture, which again, a lot of couples already struggle with. And so when you bring in this third relationship of cancer, and I like to think of it as a third, it's a challenge that so many couples don't know how to actually adapt the relationship for, Again, so the way I always tell people to think about relationships is it's two people, and sometimes more if you're in polyamorous relationships or anything, but at least two people And then in a relationship. So it's one person, maybe others, and the relationship. And each of those have to be taken care of. And I think that that's the thing that when we talk about sex and intimacy, it's okay, how does the relationship adapt to this? And how does each individual's needs, wants, and desires, which have shifted most likely,
Right.
how do you begin to address those individually for yourself and then support each other in the relationship? And even as I say that, there's like math to it.
Right.
You know,
Yes.
like,
I'm
and
nodding
it's
my head going,
appreciating that.
there's a lot to unpack here because I want to break down. You're talking about the intimacy versus sex. And then, yes, there's the mental side, but there's a physical side we can't get. I mean, I can. This is what I'm sure other survivors might say to you is, okay, great. I can flip the switch and fake it till I make it and say that I feel sexy or I feel better about myself, even though a lot of the medication removes your sex drive, or maybe they've thrown you into menopause because of the chemo. But then physically, internally, you don't feel the same because you're not the same.
So, one of the things that you were mentioning as far as the physical, as far as how many cancer survivors lose desire, both genders, and that's probably the biggest complaint, is that cancer survivors just no longer have sexual desire. And so you have what we call mismatched libido. And again, that's also very common in all couples. And I always want to say this because I do think that while there are, of course, special considerations for individuals impacted by cancer, it's also important to normalize that whether it's cancer, menopause, any other injury, we have to adapt our relationships and our sexuality as we evolve. Cancer is just one of those parties that we didn't want to get invited to.
But there's also guilt, I will say, as a couple and as a spouse. If I lose my desire, I still want to be intimate because I want to please my husband and have a healthy relationship, because you feel guilt for all those years you couldn't be intimate and that your body has changed and you do feel different, and you put them through hell and they stood by your side, and not everyone stands by your side. So I'll be very clear about that too. So you have the guilt of whether you feel good or not, you feel like you should, and you should find, I mean, so I know you're saying there are seasons of life, but there's also seasons of guilt.
Well, and I think that you pointing out to the guilt and resentment, frustration, very common emotions that really are going to lead to disconnection, you know? And so much of when we talk about sex and we talk about the physicality, so much emphasis is placed on, oh, try this. Or even when we talk about hormone replacements and things like that to boost desire, we know that for desire and for this connection, so much of it has to be one, approaching your body somatically, teaching your body how to reconnect with it so that you can actually begin to explore what actually stimulates it. But your body has to feel safe, which means the relationship has to feel safe and secure. And so the way we want to start approaching that is one, acknowledging the guilt, acknowledging the emotions in the room, which is not easy. Most people will say communication is key. Most people are actually really good communicators, except when you don't want to hurt your partner or think they may leave you from what you say. You
Right.
know,
True.
most people are actually great communicators. It's just when there's something at risk and it's personal, that's when it's hard, you know? But so emotions can't be nurtured if they're not even like really given space in the room. Because one of the things that ends up happening is we pathologize the patient because, well, you're the one who had cancer. You're the one who's broken, which, it's objectively true that you had, but the patient had cancer. But in any relationship, when we pathologize one person as the problem, that's never going to get us anywhere. All that's going to lead to is disconnect. And so So again, instead of looking at it that way, you're allowed to feel guilty while also not taking while not taking responsibility for why it happened.
So, but what would you say as a survivor? Like,
I don't feel any connection with my body. I don't feel any sensation. I know I want to, and I just don't. I don't have that gumption. I don't have that. Nothing is stimulating me. Nothing's interesting to me right now. I don't feel sexy. I don't feel close. I feel tight. Do you notice one thing I'm doing over and over and over? Yeah.
because you don't want to put the blame on them. But here's what I also, okay, so there's the emotion. Again, mentally, I and other patients could still maybe get in the mood despite the medication, but it's the physiological changes that happen internally that you hear patients from one degree. I mean, there's different levels of that. It's like a razor. It's not, I mean, the chemo has like removed all lubrication. So basically, it's just painful. Then once it's painful, then the caregiver doesn't want to hurt the patient because it's caregiver patient again, and I may hurt him or hurt her. And these are the conversations that people who are coming to me as an advocate saying, we need to talk about this. I recently had a survivor, a friend of mine who was on my hall when I went through leukemia. And she called me and she said, I told my husband, just go cheat on me because I'm just feel like I'm never going to make him happy sexually. My heart broke because I personally would never say that to my husband. Everyone has their own dynamics. But what made me sad is that she felt like she wasn't good enough after that. And it
Mm,
made me want to cry.
yeah.
So again, I don't judge how everyone's handling it, but I think, there's no rule book on it, except we're turning to you to help give us some sort of rule book of how do we navigate this journey.
I appreciate that you're saying every couple gets to decide what are the rules and boundaries in their relationship. I believe rules are meant to restrict rather than boundaries are meant to provide like guidance, and support. And so actually I've worked with several couples on adjusting and opening up their relationships, because also remembering that, again, intimacy isn't just physical. And one of the things that oftentimes happens is when particularly women experience physical pain, sexual pain, particularly upon penetration, once they experience it, if they keep on experiencing it, it is a re-traumatization that accumulates. It gets worse and worse and worse, which is why you end up generally with aversion.
I would say at that point, you feel like a failure. I mean, because you're like, well, I've let them down over and over and over again and forget. Then the whole mood is gone. Um,
Well, and so all of those pressures, all of those norms, again, a woman, get there's a lot, particularly when we're talking about heterosexual couples here. There's so many norms of how a woman is supposed to be available. And pleasure, to be fair, hasn't actually been part of the norms for sex for women.
right,
And
right.
so, and I'm saying that realistically because our average cancer patients are in their late 50s. But so within that, it's acknowledging that, okay, how can we actually begin to negotiate this? But it has to start with acknowledging where are we even at? And that's, I think, one of the hardest things for patients to actually acknowledge is that, one, I do feel guilty, but I also don't want to have sex. And I don't know if I ever will. I mean, and to be clear, I want everybody to know there is no right amount of sex to have. There's no, oh, get 12 grams in a day of semen, like there's nothing of that. Like there isn't. So even when we talk about low desire, it's not as if we have this barometer. All it is relative to the partner. That's it.
And as you said, it's not just sex, although some men or some people may roll their eyes. There's the intimacy, the hand holding, and the, you know, just the physical touch, hold,
Absolutely.
snuggling, all of that. And one would hope that there's steps to that to make, I would say, as I've shared with my husband, like, hey, I feel like when I went through my bone marrow transplant and my DNA wasn't even the same, and then I went through breast cancer, I felt like I looked in the mirror. I'm like, I looked and I'm like, who are you? Like, who the hell are you? Because I
Yeah.
don't look like me. I don't feel like me. I even told my husband, we should get married again because I want you to remarry version 2, 2.0, because the first one you married in here. Yeah, I don't even have her DNA. So let's just get remarried. I couldn't fit into my dress after all the steroids. And anyway, it just turned into a joke after that. But there is so much truth to not feeling who you are. And one thing you pointed out when we talked is that you need to first be at peace with yourself, which is very hard. But one thing you talked about is feeling at peace with your body, you yourself alone.
Yep. And I always say self-pleasure. I mean, self-pleasure is the best pleasure. And that isn't just meaning masturbation. It is really, I mean, a great example is with breast cancer survivors, where, reacquainting themselves with their breasts, which is, again, throughout our whole entire lives, up until when we pass, there's a focus on our breasts. And there's
Yes.
so much pressure around it. And then the reality of so many women experience zero sensation.
Or
Keeping
they
in
lose
mind,
their breasts. They're just,
yes,
I lost
yes,
mine like many do. And you're like,
yeah.
okay, now what?
Well, and so much of what we know is that it's not necessarily the what, it's the how. It's not necessarily what you're doing with your body. It is how you are experiencing the sensations. And so we always want to start external, like concretely, like what actually feels good, trying to touch ourselves with different body parts, starting again away from the genitals. And again, you want to start this on our own and then with our partners, where we just begin to explore what sensations do we actually ever experience.
Uh-huh.
And then, and then once you just say, okay, this is what I'm feeling, then you lean towards what's actually pleasurable. And I always encourage both patients individually and then as a couple, stay away from the genitals. Because again, that's a little landmass for our whole body. And our body has so many sensors throughout it that you talked about how people miss holding hands, miss cuddling. So much of that is because there's this perception of if I start, but I don't get to intercourse, then I'm not going to start at all. And that's why that ends up happening. That's why couples end up sleeping on opposite sides of the bed and not being as intimate, because there's either a fear of rejection or a fear of pressure. If I start here, it's going to go straight to intercourse. So much of when we are reacquainting individually and then as a couple, we want to take the pressure off of sex. And I don't care how it seems so counterintuitive, but if you haven't had sex for penetrative intercourse for a long time, well then, okay. You're not messing up that party anyways, but take the
Right.
pressure off of it and
Right.
build up the trust individually. So like when we talk about vaginal dilators for
I
women
was
or
just going to
penile
bring that up.
pumps for women, for men, all of those are rehabilitative tools, but I don't want people to think of them just as literally like chisels and tools. I mean, because literally that's what people start thinking about with dilators is, oh, we're stretching. But instead, as a tool that we can actually move at our pace and feel how our body is reacting and actually begin to build back our relationship with our body, knowing how do we want it to be touched, you
So
know?
you are good with saying to a woman, get dilators,
Yeah. I
get
mean, generally, you want to do it after your body is fully healed. So at least 4 or 5 months after radiation or after primary or secondary treatment. But it's like, again, and that can be daunting for a lot of women, particularly a lot of women haven't played with many sex toys. I mean, the majority of women haven't. And so it can be very intimidating. but it also can be very empowering, you know? And so on my site, like I have a lot of resources and I give to patients like educational videos that I've created for prior studies on for vaginal dilators, for penile pumps, for injections, penile injections, for all of these tools that we know there's so much research showing we know they help. But I think that the big thing that couples need to remember is that one, it is not a linear process. So it's very common to make some progress and then also something happen and just go like this, you know? And so to be patient and that also that this is a journey, you know? Just like penetrative intercourse shouldn't be the goal, like as well as orgasm shouldn't be the goal. It's focusing on what's that ride like, you know? Because ultimately how we experience something is irregardless of the physicality. Our body is just the vessel in which we are experiencing something.
So I want to add that I did speak to somebody else on another podcast who said also get vaginal suppositories. There's a brand out there that does not raise or your hormone levels. It's more like a coconut oil based that will help you because the chemo. I want you to explain the physiological effects that this is not your fault. That the chemo does impact. I mean, it dries up your skin on your face. It can you break that down so there is not the guilt that you didn't bring this upon yourself, the drugs did?
Yeah. No, I mean, I hate the term vaginal atrophy that we use for women, of when the vagina narrows, shrinks, shortens, and also dries. The number of women and patients who I've seen, but we know that that dryness can lead to chafing so much that it actually hurts to walk, you know? And so, and unfortunately, that is a reality that so few women, I mean, ever feel that they can talk about, and something that a lot of women will still have penetrative intercourse with. And again, because of that pressure. And so, you know, the biggest things that I can recommend are for to begin to actually play with one, so acknowledging, no, it's not your fault. And again, our bodies are not broken. We are mortal and they are going to constantly change. And we are benefiting, particularly in oncology, for just ridiculous advancements in medicine that are it's the fastest part of medicine. And it's miracles every day. And it's honoring that we are trying to fight what is natural, right? And that the treatments of it are hurting our bodies as well, you know? And so it's taking care of our bodies to support ourselves. And in that taking care, we have to have some compassion with ourselves. And again, even in like a lot of the, you can either use lubricants on the spots, or if you're using like any type of hormonal things to actually that you have to use on the regular, like using just the administration of it as opportunities to feel your body, you
Yeah,
know? And again,
absolutely.
using all of these strategies as not just, oh, I'm giving this to my body to get this. I'm using this for lubrication, but instead, how does that feel? How's my body welcoming it? How do I want it to welcome it? You
Right,
know?
right.
And
But but here's my question to even back up, like, why is this not discussed at the doctor's with your oncologist?
particularly when we talk about transplant and CAR T, like these are very intense and prolonged treatments that many patients just feel so lucky. Why would I even bring up my sex life? I'm alive. I should be grateful for what I have. And then on the provider side, it's embarrassment, assumptions of their own biases of whether or not sex is important to this person, particularly if this person is from a marginalized group, or depending on their sexuality, their relationship status, all of these assumptions, and their age, all of these assumptions. But then on top of it, physicians don't like to ask questions that they can't answer or have a referral to. And so what you see is this disconnect. It is shocking how particularly gynecologists, are not trained in addressing actual sexual concerns. And yet, who are we supposed to go to? Urologists, they're either going to like give the, they're going to give you a pill for men. That's going to be the number
Right,
one
right.
thing. And it's already hard for them to try, but if there is distress, it is just not going to work. The distress has to be supported. And so much of this is that oftentimes you have this divide of this silence between patients and providers because of all of their assumptions, all the things we just talked about. But then on top of it, that the patient isn't getting support there, but then they're also not getting support at home. And then the partner has no one to talk to because, oh, what a jerk they are, women, no matter the gender, because wait a second, they're not being supportive. You have all these factors, and what it ends up leading to is silence. And that's why so much is us spreading the conversation. And so much of what I teach clinicians is literally, my research showed that one question opens up the conversation. How sexually satisfied are you? We found that is related to relationships, sexual satisfaction, overall quality of life, distress, physical functioning. It was such a key indicator of overall well-being. And when you put sex in anything, you have already normalized. You can talk to me about anything.
Yeah. So what does that say? If sexual health makes everything better, then clearly we need sexual health. So we need to work on this issue.
We know that again, sexual satisfaction isn't only, it's associated, but it is not like, it's not like the highest correlate to frequency. So we know that it is the quality of connection, and that sexual satisfaction, again, plenty of asexual individuals feel sexually satisfied. And again, it's because there is not a right number and it's focusing on how someone feels sexually connected to their bodies. And I believe that our sexuality and our sexual energy, that is our life force, just like how you're sitting back and how you're like, oh yeah.
My God,
And
because I'm
how
thinking
I'm
of
like,
all,
oh my gosh,
yeah, I'm thinking of all the conversations I've had with my husband. He might freak out if I can't share all of them. But I just remember being frustrated with him saying, "You have no idea what I've been through." When the first time it wasn't happening, and he's like, "Oh yeah, okay. I only slept at your side for an entire year. I took care of you. I bathed you. I did all of this. So yes, I know what you've been through. And I see you're hurting, and I don't want you to be in pain because you've already been through enough pain."
yeah,
But then you're
yeah,
like, well, what about our marriage? So we had to go through counseling and and it's work every day. We always have to work of changing the dynamic from patient caregiver to husband wife.
what I always encourage is not to think that memories necessarily have to, or identities, these parts of ourselves, that caregiver role that your husband played, that's a part of himself. And the idea in when we think about all these different parts of ourselves is not that that part just needs, let's let it go. I hate that term, let it go. It's integrate. And maybe that part, that caregiver part doesn't have to come out as much. Maybe that Playboy part wants to come out more. Who knows? But like, there's all of these parts of ourselves that, that all get to be nurtured. But sometimes that caregiver, that protector, that side comes out more, and it needed to. But now what are the other parts of ourselves that can maybe say, hey, I get it. You're trying to protect. You're trying to do good.
Right, right.
Hold on. I'm here now too. And I'm just going to sit with you until you're ready. And then the Playboy can come out, and it's an honoring of all of these different parts.
So as we wrap up, do you have one or two takeaways? I can tell you what I think your takeaways are, and then you can tell me if I'm
Okay.
wrong. I feel like the number one takeaway would be to have communication, to say, here's how I'm feeling, and open the door for your spouse, because some relationships that had communication issues before it's going to magnify. So let's have a conversation about how I'm feeling, how you're feeling. Do you feel angry or resentful that I cancer? Do you feel this? And here, how do we say, here's where I want to go? And then that communication seems to be like your number one. And number two,
Again, communication is key. Communication is key, but I think it's very important to appreciate that the reason people don't communicate is because they don't feel safe enough to. Okay. So you can't just, again, this is why telling people just try saying this. Different if I tell a doctor, try saying this, because they've had lots of communication skills training. They're talking to, hundreds of patients all the time. They've got lots of practice. In one relationship, um, it can be really hard. And I want to honor that when people don't feel safe enough in that relationship. And I'm not just talking physical abuse. If you really are worried or not used to having conversations that are emotional, it's meeting yourself where you're at. Don't just open the door to talking about sex if you can't even talk about openly that you don't want to go to this place for vacation. Start on less threatening things to actually begin to build up the trust and safety in your relationship, to actually talk about how you feel, how you assert your needs. And this is why so much, again, when people come for sex therapy, we're not focusing just on the sex at the start, right? And so it's really building up the skills in the relationship and the trust and the safety to actually begin to have those more sensitive conversations.
I'll
So
say this, and I would love your insight. I know we do need to wrap up. Is that I was very blessed that my husband wanted to, I mean, he waited for me to open the door and say, we need counseling. I've learned a lot at these conferences. I'm not the only one. We should go to counseling. And we went together. But if he said no, I was going to go by myself because like I felt like I need to come to terms with who I am, which is a struggle as it is. And
yeah,
so if I feel like, again, I'm not a doctor like you are. If your spouse says they're not coming, that it's still a good idea if you have access, because access is a big issue, to see a therapist of any kind first to help you to cope with your cancer recovery. Go, whether your spouse is going to go or not. I mean, it was helpful my husband came with me.
100%. We know that when one person in a couple goes to therapy, there's relationship change. And oftentimes inherent in therapy, women are more presenting in therapy. And and to be fair, women are also the initiators of change in relationships, in heterosexual relationships, you know? And so yes, at least one person come. Like, and yes, it does take the dynamic. You can't make anyone change, orgasm, or love you. Like, it's always remembering that. You can't make anybody to do that. But you can change, and we can only change ourselves. And then next thing you know, the relationship dynamic naturally change. I tell everyone to think that there's only so much space in a relationship. Think of it as a container. And when one person is pushing, 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 the other person has no choice but then to get smaller and pull away, you know? And so it's honoring that if you don't push so hard, oh, there's more space for that person to wiggle around. They're going to naturally change. And so it's focusing on what you can control, which is only yourself first, and then looking at how can you nurture the relationship. Again, there's each individual or each in the relationship, and then the relationship. And all of those parts need to be nurtured.
How I say, because again, I'm not a doctor, but I always say you have to be your own hero. No one's going to do it for you. So if your spouse or your friend, your partner does not want to go to the counseling, you go to counseling for yourself to heal what you need to heal so you can be your own hero in this process.
Well, and I think particularly for this audience and everyone who is listening to this right now, the reason I focus on sex, and I've been studying, researching, and working with cancer for over 25 years. And the reason I focus on relationships and sex in all of my research and my work is because why are we prolonging life? Why are we going through hell and back to prolong our lives, if not for the relationships? Like, that's why we're doing all of this. And so particularly for this audience, it's remembering like why you actually did this. And that in and of itself, you did not have to. You just did not have to. Again, the longer we live, cancer is it's natural. It makes sense. It's unfortunate, sucks, but if you're going to fight through it, then this, you deserve your needs, wants, and desires to be exactly what you want. Everyone deserves that.
Amen to that. And on
Yeah.
that note, we will leave it at that. Dr. Catalina, you've been amazing. I do want to send people to your website. I know eventually you're working on a book. I'm also working on a book. And you have a book that's going to be coming out, and you'll have more on your website. So tell us where people can find you, read more about you, and learn some of the strategies that you offer.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can certainly follow me on socials, on YouTube and TikTok and Instagram. I'm at the Intimacy Doc. Then you can go to my website, theintimacydoc.com. And there I have lots of resources. I have different programs. I have lots of different educational videos that I've created, where patients can learn about this. I also have, if you are looking for support, what questions to ask, and then if you are looking for anything, you can either reach out to me, any support for both individuals and couples. And if I can't support you, then I will help you find somebody who can, and that includes for like pelvic floor health, to find gynecologists and different urologists, and really working holistically to get you to have your needs, wants, and desires met.
We forgot to get to that. You're right. Okay, so communication, pelvic floor therapist, dilators, vaginal suppositories. This is on your to-do list to research and look into. I don't remember what you said for the male side, but I can recap the women's side because I've heard it before from my doctors.
Yeah. Well, and again, all of these things, there's all of these tools, and it's remembering that these tools are just tools. They are they're supporting us in how we connect to our bodies. At the core of it all, our body knows first. Our body is reacting, and it's our connection to our body. So we want to take somatic approaches. We want to improve our connection with our body, and that includes how we see ourselves, how we experience ourselves, starting from the outside and coming in. And that's why so much of my work is somatic, and then also includes a lot of tantra.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. You've been so insightful. I love your energy, that you match my energy. We have that same level of energy to make a difference. Dr. Catalina, the Intimacy Doc, bringing some very insightful information, and you can find her and everything you need on her website. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you again to BMT InfoNet for making this episode possible. To learn more about their incredible work supporting bone marrow, stem cell, and CAR T-cell transplant recipients, visit bmtinfonet.org. That's bmtinfonet.org. Want to make sure you never miss an episode of Stage Free? Subscribe, like, and give us a review. You can find us wherever you get your podcast.